Good evening. May I say that it is truly an honor and a privilege to be invited here to present this televisual tribute to that great comic genius, Terence Spike Milligan. I have, of course, been an avid fan of Spike's since first listening to the Goons on the wireless as a young child in the dormitory. And over the years, Spike and I have delighted in what you might call a knockabout repartee. In fact, at the Comedy Awards in 1994, Spike honored me in front of millions of viewers with the title of Groveling Little Bastard. Well, Spike, tonight is your night. And I'd like to say I wish you truly a very, very, very happy 80th birthday. You odious little toad. Why don't you take your present and shove it up your ass, eh? You
Coming up next, a loose Canon celebrates Spike Milligan's unique 50-year career. At 9:50, Terry Wogan hosts a star-studded special comic birthday party. Happy birthday, Spike. And at 10:40, we have an exclusive interview with the great man, Spike in his own words. Welcome to the world of Spike.
Spike Milligan is an interterrestrial person. He's not of this world. He's a gift from heaven.
It was an act of genius. He just produced that stuff from nowhere except his own mind.
I think when we look back over the mid-20th century, Spike Milligan has to be seen, quite apart from his own performances, but as a creator of genius.
Tonight, a tribute to the late Sir Edward Elgar, whose favourite instrument was the B-flat garden hose, for which he wrote many great pieces, including Underneath the Armpits, Do My Names Away. Right.
Spike Milligan revolutionized comedy, first on radio and then on television. Yet he was never happy to rest on his laurels, seemingly driven by an insatiable need to write and perform, whatever the cost.
Spike lives in his head. Spike actually lives in his head. And sometimes the ideas and the writing are just too much. They come too fast.
I've got this photograph of you. It's in my head, and it won't ever fade away.
Yet Spike, the original workaholic, has always maintained that all he wanted to do was relax, make music, and talk to the animals.
I love you. Oh.
For 30 years, families sat down together to listen to a BBC that was warm, safe, and reassuring.
Well, thank you, Mr. Reynolds. Well, after welcoming you to the BBC, may I welcome you to the Goon Show and introduce you to the Goon!
But when Spike exploded onto the airwaves in 1951, he broke the mold forever.
Here, Echoes, hold these 3 red sticks of dynamite.
Oh, wait. One of these isn't a stick of dynamite.
You sure about that, Echoes?
One of them was a stick of Blackpool rock. Of course
Yeah?
I'm sure. Just a minute.
My ears went boing.
Of course I could be wrong, you know.
And I thought, that's for us, that's ours. That's why my dad doesn't get it. It's not for him. It's for us.
He's blown all his teeth out of his old cake-o. What funny looking up. You running swine, you. While I was laughing, you dropped a stick of dynamite down my trousers and exposed my secret part.
My father would look at the set as though there was something mechanically wrong with it. He would walk out and leaving me to think, this is mine, you know, it's all mine.
The goons included Peter Sellers, Michael Bentine and Harry Seacombe. But the show was pure Spike.
He took the conventions of radio and just went a little bit further, just overplayed them slightly for comedy effect.
Captain Seagun. Yes. Is this the right road to Hungary? Yes. Then why do we keep galloping round and round this room?
Sound effects were Spike's obsession.
He worked and worked to get these sound effects, and he invented like a whole new understanding of what sound effects could do on radio.
He would have, which was very audacious then, would have a sort of 45 seconds of silence when someone had knocked on a door. Hello, Min, I'm just coming. I'll come down and let you in. And there'd be this long, long silence. Just footsteps. Then they come to the door. Hello, let me know. I'll go and get the key. And then there'd be another 45 seconds while we went upstairs again. This was just brilliant, you know. And just footsteps and silence. And I would remember biting the side of my armchair. I thought it was so incredibly funny.
Each week brought a new and ever more extraordinary plot, but the same cast of characters.
That simply hadn't occurred before. A world with strange, sort of Conan Doyle-like villains, like Riptide Thin, and Count Jim's steaming thighs Moriarty, and this extraordinary blood knock.
But Eccles was the nation's favourite.
Oh, we can all do that, you know, this generation.
I heard that. And let me tell you, it ain't looks that count, it's what you got up here that matters.
What have you got up there?
Nothing.
And I liked me butter. It was pathetic. That was a nice thing. You know, start off all strong and defiant, and then get a bit sort of feeble.
No one was immune from goon mania. Bluebottle was the perfect role model for a young Prince Charles.
Just because you got bigger legs than I have, it's all your fault.
Not my fault.
It
I charge
is your fault.
You don't remember.
Do.
You get it all wrong.
No, it's your fault.
Only 6 years since the war, barrack room boardiness was still fresh in Spike's mind.
Spike loved being subversive. They had a character called Hugh Jampton. Hugh Jampton. Well, of course, in army terms, it was Huge Hampton, a thing to be cited in the showers, you know.
Oh, presenting to you, Captain Hugh Jampton to tell a tale of India.
The producer was Pat Dixon. Now, Pat was very naive in many respects, and he had no idea why we got such a big laugh when this name was mentioned. So we used to say, hey, he's a friend of ours in the army. Oh, yes, I see, yes. And then it wasn't until, as I say, about 3 or 4 weeks that one of the engineers told him what it really meant, and he went berserk.
By the time he married June Marlowe in 1952, Spike was a star. But the pressure of writing the show single-handedly was taking its toll.
Peter and I, and Mike in the beginning, were able to go off and do our own thing in the theatres or the films or whatever we were doing. And the Goon Show was a bit of fun on the Sunday. And for Spike, it wasn't a bit of fun on the Sunday. It was a long, hard slog. So he really suffered. I mean, his marriage suffered and his health suffered.
He used to suddenly lock himself in his office and he wouldn't emerge for about 3 days. He got to such an extent of not wishing to meet people that he used to, he'd be in the office and he'd send a telegram from his office to the desk downstairs, asking if they'd go and get him some fish and chips. Because he would not talk to anybody directly, you know.
Shortly after the birth of his first baby, Spike had a breakdown. He was taken to a psychiatric hospital, an experience he was to reconstruct for a television documentary many years later.
I remember seeing a film, I was a television critic, and he says they put me deliberately in a room where you could hear outside the window them emptying all the dustbins every morning. And they did it on purpose. They put me there so that I would be driven even madder by the dustbins.
Stop that bloody noise!
Insensitive bastards.
Spike believed his mental illness had its roots in the battle fatigue he suffered in the war. His response to his breakdown was typical. He wrote about it.
Even when he was in those places, he wrote some marvellous goon show scripts. And of course he also wrote a lot of good poetry.
The pain is too much. 1,000 barbed winters are growing in my head, and in my ears the sound of the coming dead. All seasons, all same, all living, all pain. No opiate to lock still my senses. Only left the body-locked tenses.
Many of his poems really are about his manic depression, really, coming to terms with himself. And some very outspoken, some very raw. I think some of the poems are almost therapeutic.
I shall resist with all my might the artificial glass of night.
In time, Spike made a full recovery and returned to write another 150 successful episodes of The Goons.
His self-discipline pulls him through most things. The building can be on fire, and if he's writing, well, the building's on fire. It doesn't affect him. He goes on doing his writing, you know. But that's discipline.
I'm walking backwards for Christmas across the Irish Sea.
In 1955, The Goons topped the charts with I'm Walking Backwards for Christmas. They were now reaching an audience of 7 million. But not everyone was won over.
I don't know many girls who liked the Goons. It wasn't a sort of a pulling point when you were a sort of young teenager trying to get into someone's blouse to say, you know, I love your titties. Just slap you, quite rightly so.
Pull up a chair. There you go.
Somebody open a window.
In 1960, Spike finally called time on The Goon Show, and the nation grieved. It took 15 years of campaigning to coax the team back together for one final performance.
Echo?
Yeah?
It's me, Tin Button.
Oh, my friend.
Yes, I'm your friend. You remember me?
I remember you.
Yes. Why do you not open the door?
Okay, how do you open the door?
You turn the knob on your side.
I haven't got a knob on my side.
Spike, now preoccupied with his 3 young children, launched a new career as a children's poet.
What is a bungalow, Daddy? A bungalow, son, said I, is a tall bag of cheese plus a Chinaman's knees and the leg of a nanny goat's eye. How strange is a bungalow, Daddy? As strange, I replied. When the sun's in the west, it appears in the west, sailing out with a noonday tide. What shape's a bungalow, Daddy? The shape, my son, I'll explain. It's tall round the nose, which continually grows in the general direction of Spain.
At the same time, he was divorcing his wife and fighting to win custody of their children.
He wrote a lot of his children's verse after his divorce to June, I think, and one of the reasons he was always afraid of losing his children, and writing the poems was a way of letting them know that he loved them.
Today I saw a little worm wriggling on his belly. Perhaps he'd like to come inside and see what's on the telly.
Unusually for the time, he won the bitter custody battle for his children, who would not see their mother for many years.
I was very, very young when my mother and father split up. But I'm very aware that at that time, Dad started writing poetry that was very much for little people as we were then. And he started writing silly verse for kids.
Bye, bye, bye.
Silly Verse for Kids was the first of 10 books of children's poetry.
My sister Laura's bigger than me and lifts me up quite easily. I can't lift her. I've tried and tried. She must have something heavy inside.
He used to go around the garden, didn't he, and write his little poems and put them under stones in the garden and tell the kids that the fairies had written them, and they had to go out and find these poems.
I remember having a fight with the boy down in the stream who said, you know, you're a narn if you believe that. And I said, it's true, because I've got proof.
But the love for his children couldn't stop him sliding back into the grip of depression. Still, he kept working.
Probably the very worst time of his life, which was his first divorce, and he was traumatized by it. He wrote Cocoon.
Although a comic novel, the book betrayed Spike's preoccupation with his ex-wife's adultery.
A little excerpt from a novel I've written. It's about a gentleman who's a lady who's trying to divorce her husband in Ireland. The solicitor listened to her very attentively. Mrs. Doolan, just because you don't like him, that's no grounds for separation. Well, then, make a few suggestions, he said. Well, he said, has he ever struck you? I said, God, no, I'd kill him if he did. Well, he said, has he ever been cruel to the children? Oh, never. Oh, he said, well, has he ever left you short of money? No, every Friday I catch hold of him and shake him. I see, said the solicitor. He pondered. Well, it's not going to be easy. He said, now, wait a minute. Wait. Now, think very hard, Mrs. Doonan. Has he ever been unfaithful to you? Her face lit up. By God, we got him there, she said. I don't think he was the father of my last child.
3 years later, Spike married classical singer Paddy Ridgway. They went on to have a daughter, Jane, herself an inspiration for more poetry.
The old baboon by the light of the moon, coaling his auburn hair. What was the next word? The monkey spunk right up the elephant's trunk.
Yes, that's me.
And fell on his...
Knees.
And what became of the... Monkey.
Boy.
I don't know how he did it, but he had some kind of knack for getting right through to children. They understood exactly what he was getting at.
There are holes in the sky.
For the rain to get in.
They're not very big. That's why rain is thin.
You know, it's sort of silly poem, but it's like, in a way, it sort of encapsulates Milligan's mind for me, because it's poetry. It's silly, it's funny, but it's poetry because it makes images, and it's like the idea that rain is thin. It's just a wonderful perception.
At the age of 50, Spike now threw his energy into transforming the mould of television comedy. The first of the Q series, Q5, was broadcast in 1969.
When I saw Q5 first, I mean, I was sort of amazed and stunned. There was Spike just sort of throwing the form away and just sort of doing whatever he liked.
Forward, march!
Terry Jones and I had a telephone conversation one night just after we'd watched, I think it was the first episode of Q3, but I'm not sure. And we said to each other, well, he's just done Monty Python, isn't he? I mean, that was the sort of thing we were going to do. And Terry said, I agree. I said, well, so what are we doing?
What are we going to do now?
What are we going to do now? We kind of put the phone down, rather despairing of the fact that this man had just done what we were vaguely thinking of doing.
The Q series showed complete disregard for all the accepted rules of comedy. Sketches had no beginning, middle or end, and punchlines were unnecessary.
To finish a sketch, people would just look at the camera and say, "What do we do now? What do we do now?"
What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now?
You get closer and nearer and nearer to the camera. I mean, it's a hell of a way of ending a sketch, really.
What are we going to do now? What are we going to do now?
He had various little signature items which you could expect in most Milligan programs. Scotsman, for some weird reason. Bandaged fingers. I know why that's funny.
There was a terrible panic when you were doing BBC shows that you would go on, if you were doing a show that involved a lot of costumes, you would go on set with the name of your costume on a little label, because all costumes were labelled at that time with the character and the production. And Spike did a whole show where they all walked on with their labels on their coats. Everyone had a label on.
Excuse me, Constable. Have you seen the payoff to a comedy sketch? I seen that was no lady, that was my wife go by half hour ago on a cycle. Hey. How do you know I was a constable?
My favourite was the throw it in the curry.
Hello, darling. I'm home.
But anything you didn't know what to do with, throw it in the curry. The dog's ill. Throw it in the curry.
Somebody's exterminated Granny!
Yes! Put her in the curry!
Q was decidedly politically incorrect, even for its time.
One of the things I think Spike likes, in common with many men, it has to be said, were large memories. He was quite keen on ladies with large boobs.
Oh, it's a woman.
Spike would probably be thought very politically incorrect these days. A lot of his jokes about sex and people of different races and all that kind of thing. But I regard that as the kind of traditional food of satire, really.
Left, right. What's the matter? Couldn't you find the soap?
People have accused us of using a lot of dwarfs, you know, where you do get two for the price of one, and we had low budgets in those days.
Well, Doctor, keep thinking I'm a dwarf.
I see. Go behind the screen and change. Many people are thinking they are dwarfs. This is a common complaint. Now, normally it's due to an inferiority complex.
They loved Spike. If anybody was going to be upset about us using dwarfs, it should have been the dwarfs. But they never were. I mean, maybe they ganged up when we weren't there and sort of... It's that terrible thing about, you know, you should never tell jokes about deaf people. Well, how are they going to hear them? And who's going to tell them? Are people running around shouting at deaf people, "They told this joke about you"?
Yes, I can see no evidence of dwarfism in you. I think it is all in the mind.
I can't tell you how relieved I am to hear that, Doctor.
Good.
What you make jokes about is sex and race and religion and all these sort of basic things. And as far as I'm concerned, he's on the side of the angels about that. And so is someone like Johnny Spade.
In 1969, Spike worked with Eric Sykes and Johnny Spade on a sitcom called Curry and Chips, which was based in a toy factory.
Eric was the foreman, the liberal foreman of the place.
and we had the racist Labour shop steward, and Spike came in as Packy Paddy.
I leave Pakistan because there are far too many of them.
The show was well-intentioned, but it backfired.
What's your one? Oh no, I'm Irish.
The show was very successful. The public loved it, but it got come under the old thing again that they called it the powers that be, who put shows on and take them off, called it racist. Missed the point entirely. And so after 6 weeks, 6 shows, we came off the air and didn't come back anymore.
At the same time, Spike was working on the first volume of his war memoirs, Adolf Hitler, My Part in His Downfall.
How it all started. September 3rd, 1939. The last minutes of peace ticking away. Father and I were watching Mother digging out air raid shelter. She's a great little woman, said Father. And getting smaller all the time, I added. 2 minutes later, a man called Chamberlain, who did Prime Minister impressions, spoke on the wireless. He said, "As from 11 o'clock, we are at war with Germany." I loved the we.
In the subsequent film version, Jim Dale played the young Spike, while Spike himself played his own father.
Good news, Kitty. December the 3rd, I'm due for a fresh sock, a quarter of Spam. It's good. It's a good book, this.
He somehow catches the essence of how soldiers looked at things, what they missed, what they anticipated, what they looked forward to, what they were fearful about. He catches those little daily preoccupations which the larger historical pictures miss out.
Who said that? Hey, lads, come here. Do you want to see something? What you got?
Hey, shut up. Come on, give the lad a chance.
Listen, I want no...
It was after lights out that some of the most hysterical moments occurred. Those who had been drinking heavily soon made it known by great asphyxiating farts that rendered their owners unconscious and cleared the beds all round.
Now, note the contrast with the boiled potato effect.
Spike, on occasion, came onto the set to see the show, how we were doing. And I remember we were on location in the fields shooting one of the most expensive scenes of the whole film, which is where a bomber was shot down.
Turn over. Keep running. Hurry!
It's the scene of our truck coming back and me walking into the wreckage and the smoke and the flames, and through my eyes you see the devastation, and then you suddenly realize that I've caught sight of our friend, and it's a very, very tragic moment in the book. Oh no. Explaining this to Spike when we were sitting together. What scene's this, folks? I said, well, this, and I told him this was the scene. He said, oh, yes, that's funny. That should be good. I said, when did this happen? He said, it didn't. I said, what are you talking about? He said, it never happened. I said, but it's in the book. He said, don't believe everything you read.
This is written as a protest against the increasing tension in modern society due to overcrowding and the deep-down romantic interlude we all long for to help us escape the 20th century tyranny. It's called Plastic Woman.
At the height of his comic powers, Spike was also determined to be taken seriously.
What are you saying, supermarket shopping lady in your scarlet telephone box? Lady with a shopping bag full of labeled pollution with secret codes. What are you saying? Is this your dream booth? Are you telling some plastic operator you are Princess Grace? And can he put you through to Buckingham Palace? 2 decimal pence is very little to pay for a dream in Catford. If only the label on the door didn't say out of order. Shouldn't it be on you?
It's funny that when people are off guard and writing comedy, and they don't think they're being serious, they often are doing something which is more serious than when they actually, as it were, clear their throat, straighten their tie, and say, no, but seriously, though. When people start to say, no, but seriously, though, they're usually at their worst.
If I could write words like leaves on an autumn forest floor, what a bonfire my letters would make. But if I could speak words of water, you would drown when I said, I love you.
I wonder whether Spike's sometimes been disappointed that the establishment, the literary establishment, hasn't reviewed his work and taken it seriously. And I think probably because they would find it sentimental.
I don't think poetry is really what you'll be remembered for. It's not Patience Strong exactly, but nor is it W.H. Auden or Ted Hughes.
But despite a lack of critical acclaim, Spike's poetry has sold consistently well. By the mid-70s, Spike wore his heart firmly on his sleeve. Family life was all important, and this was reflected in his work. But life at home wasn't always idyllic.
In his 50s, and he was at probably the peak of his illness, it involved a lot of going to bed for days. He used to put big notices up on the door saying, F off, basically, it'd go away, and the only people he'd let in the room were his children to bring in food. I mean, he was like a prisoner. And he used to demand lots of sweet things, and we'd take in plates of ice cream with Mars bars melted on top and all kinds of things just to keep him happy. It was like looking after a little boy who had tonsillitis. But then I remember my mother coming into the room behind me and immediately his face turning to thunder. They get the worst of it, the wives, you know.
What's it like being Mrs. Spike Milligan?
Interesting. I don't really, I wouldn't know how to answer that question. He doesn't lark around. He's a quiet person. He's serious. He's often sad, yes. Well, he seems to feel that the world's responsibilities are his. Takes them on his own shoulders and makes them his own responsibilities.
I remember as a child walking on broken glass, basically. At a very young age, it was very, very, very hard. My mum, Paddy, used to really try and keep it all together, and she was excellent at it. Probably at the cost of her own life at the end of the day. It was very, very hard.
Paddy died of breast cancer in 1977. And once again, Spike retreated from the world.
When Spike gets depressed, sometimes I go round to the office and we play music. And nothing seems to help him more than that. It seems to have a tremendous therapeutic effect.
When Spike returned to the screen with Q, the enfant terrible was now a grand old man of 60. But time had not diminished his sense of the surreal.
There's been some mistake, Mr. Svengali. I can't sing.
Oh? Well, where is my beloved Trilby?
On the beloved ad stand.
It's a free-form patent thing. It's saying that the free-form is was allowed, that you could say a man walked down the road and he picks up a gun and he shot this rat who was the king of Burundi for 3 years in 1947. His brother lived in Kent and they used to boil eggs on the back of hats. But they never really knew where these hats came from. And then this rat was wearing a hat one day, you know, and it all, you would just go down rubbish links and it would all link together.
The sound of a carriage and pair were heard approaching. They pulled up outside a comedy sketch. In burst Sherlock Holmes and Mrs. Watson.
I think his comedy was an extension of his love of and his ability with jazz. A jazz trumpet player will take a little theme and perhaps around it, you know, go perhapsing away with it. I think that's what Spike often does with his writing. He'll go off on a side alley of the story and go in for all sorts of conceits and whimsies and embellishments until he creates something that is complete in itself.
The war had been over for almost 40 years, but not in Spike's head.
In all sketches, or nearly all, before any time had passed, you can be quite sure that out of this mythical war in his head would come marching a sergeant or a corporal. He'd never really escaped the war. He never has.
Well, Spike was obsessed with the war. We all were, because we had walk-on parts in battles and things. And it coloured everything he did, I think.
Hello, boys! Remember me?
In all of Spike's work, Hitler was never far away.
Hitler is Spike's obsession. He has read everything there is to do with Hitler. He was very interested in him as a character and his psychology and his whole... Coming from being a nothing, a corporal, he was an artist, a very fine artist. Spike was interested in that. He was interested in his psychology.
Deutschland, Deutschland, jubel. Meine love is like the red roof.
I think that Spike exorcised Hitler by making him so ludicrous and so strange. And he was strange. Yes, I think exorcism is quite a large part of Spike's humour.
Mr. What can I do? I've got to do.
Hitler, of course, represented a certain kind of authority, because Spike hated being told what to do.
I can't go to the parties with this. Schau! Komm, der Fissen, sag doch wieder!
It was a one-man crusade against authority, and if Spike was told he couldn't do something, then he would immediately do it. And I just remember he had something about the BBC car parking attendants.
Slush! Wood! Rain!
Billy Cotton Jr., 4th floor.
Fantastic! And from this place, there is no escape! Not only can you not get out of this place, but you can't get in!
Well, they've lost individuality, and so I'm an individual, and therefore I cannot become part of a great conglomerate of crap, you know. All these people standing, all these board meetings I have, and every time I get on to anybody at the BBC, say, well, he's not here, he's away at lunch. The lunch goes on from 1 till 5, and then if he's not there, he's away in France on holiday doing something, or he's having a sabbatical, or he's away, and then no, don't exist, you know.
The BBC was almost like success was a drug. He had to have more of it, and he could never have enough of it. And so the BBC would be his fixer, so it would be a love-hate relationship.
But in 1982, it was the BBC's turn to call time when they cancelled the Q series. Spike never forgave them.
And appearing tonight on... Spike Milligan!
But he refused to lie down taking every opportunity to perform on television, including the much mistrusted BBC.
Sunshine bright on me once again.
One of the things about Spike, and I think a lot of people know this, particularly in showbiz, is that he had to have credit, and credit was due, but he had to have it. He had to have the press, he had to go on game shows, he didn't need to go onto them, but he went because he wanted applause.
It's a tune I wrote for a girlfriend of mine called Sheila, right?
And in his mid-60s, Spike got married again. And still, he kept working.
He could never just lie out in the sun. Spike could never sit in a room and do nothing or just read all the time. He would be stultified by that.
He loves being loved. He loves being loved. He's very sensitive to any suggestion that he mightn't be. Oversensitive. He is a man with a skin layer missing. So he is acutely sensitive to the world, acutely sensitive to noise, acutely sensitive to what people think and say about him. But he loves people to love him.
At the age of 72, Spike was still smarting.
I did a series called the Q series. Unfortunately...
Which was brilliant.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I never... We got... Well, the BBC, they categorise things. If they don't think they're good enough, they put you on the poverty line in BBC 2. That means you're either very intellectual or a failure.
But in the last decade, Spike has written prolifically, publishing a new book almost every year. And he continues to perform his work wherever possible.
My name is Spike Milligan, and I wrote this poem called the Ning Nang Nong. On the Ning Nang Nong, all the cows go bong, and the monkeys all say boo. There's a Nong Nang Ning, where the trees go ping, and the teapots jibber jabber jew. On the Nong Ning Nang, all the mice go clang, and you just can't catch them when they do. So it's ning nang nong, the cows go bong, nong nang ning, the trees go ping, ning nong nang, the mice go clang. Oh, what a noisy place to belong is the ning nang nong.
Party thinks, well, come on, Spike, you've got Spike Milligan. Everyone loves you. You can be more successful. You can be more loved than anybody. You know, what do you want? Blood? You know. But yes, he does, and I think that's the driving force. And the energy, otherwise, he'd have given up years ago. He'd have gone fishing at the age of 50.
Spike's nearly 80, and yet he still cannot stop working because his life is meaningless without it. Totally meaningless. He's now embarking on his life story, which, hell, is a long life.
It was summer, on the lake hung a golden haze. It was summer, it was one of those endless days. And we walked through a field of clover, and then over a sheep-spun hill. And it seemed it would last forever, and it did, until came the evening. We swung on a garden gate. It was heaven. You were 7 and I was 8. And we looked at the stars suspended, walking home down an apple lane. Me and Dolly, a doll and a daisy chain. On an evening that would never come again.
Dirty, I say to you, hey, cut! Jump, our Father, who art in heaven, as you heard, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom, wait for it. Come, thy will be done. Give us this day our daily bread, silly. And forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them our trespasses against us. Ah!